security is an end-to-end problem. So far, and that's the last one that people look at anyway, building out the infrastructure. So the idea here is to start a working group with the CNCF to cover the end-to-end security. And this is like the first of the presentations that we've had. And this is like really at the beginning stages of what this working group is. We've done a lot of work. We'll go through some of them right now in terms of where we are. And I will hand this over to Ray and Dan to kickstart this. Dan, you ready?
Ready. I am ready.
All right, go.
Let me just get my screen up and get into presentation mode. All right, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there. I really wanted to come out. I'm kicking off an event, hosting event here in Toronto. So I couldn't make it. Couldn't be in one place at two places at one time. But I'm gonna try my best. So the Safe Working Group set it up. And we meet regularly. Focused on this singular concern of how do we define safety across all of the platforms, from the in the cloud native ecosystem, from the end users to developers to DevOps to the administrators to the folks running cloud infrastructure. We believe that we need a common vocabulary and shared mechanisms for conveying the integrity of that system, so that every one of those participants in the system can understand that they need to have secure access. So we've been working since basically KubeCon in Austin last year, and there's about 40 of us that meet regularly. And we've gotten through our initial charter and laying out the group, and we're on our way through the discovery and requirements gathering process, and inviting participation there, and then I'm going to move on to the next slide where we'll kind of see these the roadmaps of the steps that we're going through a little bit more visually, and we can talk about some of the concrete things that the Safe Working Group is working through. So in this discovery phase right now, we're working on defining the personas, listening to projects across the CNCF members and projects, pulling in the use cases, and setting up an initial draft of what this cloud native level definition is, and then we're going to move into a phase of building out an understanding of the existing standards, working on some common definitions, and delivering a standards in practice, so we can have that real world system architecture in a shared perspective. And then in phase 4, we're going to identify and catalog some of these projects, and identify some of the gaps in the system, so we can come and deliver our final recommendation. So we're bringing to the TOC a working group proposal, so we can go and deliver this. We're not looking to choose any single technology or or to be a standards body, but we absolutely want to inform, engage folks across all the CNCF projects, and make sure that we're looking beyond Kubernetes through Cloud Foundry and all then serverless. So we're incorporating all of those use cases, and users of the system know that they're safe. I want to highlight that our website, it's there at the bottom, and if you're interested, we meet every Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific, and we invite you to join us.
Add that when you think about safe, we talk about access, but access is something that's can be a lot of times construed as access control, so RBAC and Kubernetes and things like that. But there's actually much more to it, and this is something that we want to explore because we see out there in the industry that a lot of these things that control whether you can do something or not are developed orthogonally. So things like quota, things like network policy, access control policies, these things are all developed as kind of vertical systems that don't interoperate well. And so what we want to do in the Safe Working Group is consider all of these use cases that define what access is and see if we can come up with a framework to describe them, so that when we start to make recommendations, we're considering the whole ecosystem. And we think that this is fairly novel in terms of approaches. So we hope that we can derive a lot of value in terms of giving administrators and other developers and operators a single view over all the things that affect whether a end user can do something or not. So,
are we moving on to Sri?
Yeah, I'm here. JJ, will you be advancing the slides? So I want to share my screen then.
Sure.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everyone. I'm Shri Tumidi, and I'm the product lead for identity and access management for Cloud Foundry. I work for Pivotal, and I also lead the identity and access management offerings at Pivotal. So yeah, I've been part of the Safe Working Group since its inception, working very closely with Dan and JJ and others on defining, first of all, the personas that we are catering to with this working group. So I like yesterday I was thinking about, okay, how do I encapsulate this all in a few slides and basically try to sort of drive home, the basic needs of each persona. So when we sort of thought about the enterprise, right? JJ, do you want me to share, by the way, or? Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think it'll be easier for you to share. Okay, sounds good. You will have to stop share there because I cannot. I believe Dan is actively sharing. Okay, sounds good.
Sorry about that, Sri. I was trying to mute myself and got out of presentation mode.
No problem.
Sorry about that.
So let's see, share screen.
There you
go. Is this okay? Okay, awesome. So yeah, I thought about, okay, let's start by defining what are the key goals of each of the broad persona categories that sit within the enterprise. The first and the foremost, obviously, is the security team, and their charter is basically that all of the platform, be it like on-premise or in the cloud, the apps and the data is kept secure at all the times. But then that is not enough. enough because, like in a typical enterprise, or it could be a government agency, you are always dealing with compliance and showing or proving that you are secure at all the times, and that's where compliance plays like a huge role. So they want to make sure that compliance is met at all levels, and all the applicable regulations are met. Then come the operators, who actually have to realize the goals which have been set out by the security team. And the main charter is basically, as an operations team, you are tasked with keeping everything up and running, but you have to keep everything up and running in a secure, efficient, and sustainable manner for the business. Then come the developers or the development team, whose main task obviously is to build applications that deliver business value, but that at the core of that is, again, like doing things again in a secure manner. So any application or API that the development team is putting out that delivers some kind of business value has to again adhere to all of the security sort of best practices set out by the organization. And then finally, the end users, who are actually realizing some kind of business value through the applications. But again, they should be able to access the data and the resources that are set forth by the applications in a frictionless manner and in a secure manner. But the thing is, organizations today are like on a journey towards making everything either containerized, running in different clouds, accessing data in different clouds. So you are looking at doing these things and achieving these goals in a multi-cloud manner, and that's where the complexity is, because with every cloud comes its sort of like own set of like access criteria and security policies that you have to adhere to, and you have to interoperate. So it starts off as like a simple goal, but then it becomes a very complex goal to achieve. So let's unpack that a bit. In a security team, like I mean, I don't have to iterate all of this, but like as an infosec team, you are basically laying out best practices for security of data at rest and in motion. So you are looking at laying out guidelines for how authentication is done. How do you identify a user or a system? It could be an application or an API. How do you perform access control so that you are giving access only to the authorized subjects? And then network security as well, because you want to make sure that all access is happening in a secure fashion at a network layer. So you have to think about like firewall rules and network segmentation. And then you also have to make sure that all access is audited, everything is logged. You have to be aware of like what kind of cryptographic algorithms you are using for your encryption, and other activities like signing the packets or the data that is flowing. You have to care about like data loss prevention, metrics monitoring, and then also other sort of process things like penetration testing, dependency scanning. So these are the typical things that an infosec team cares about. From a safe working group perspective, we are very much interested actually in the authorization, the access control at all layers, not just at a network layer, but flowing all the way through to layer 7. Now, as I mentioned before, compliance is another angle to it. You have to prove that you are secure. So that's where you have to start proving that, okay, so if it is someone in the financial space or the financial vertical, you have to prove PCI compliance. If you are in the federal space, you have to prove FISMA. Now the latest one to join the compliance boat is GDPR, and soon it will be enforced, and now you have to comply with GDPR. So as a compliance, as someone on the compliance team, you're dealing with compliance with those regulations. You're dealing with auditing access, auditing resource usage. I'm sure everyone has heard about certifying access on a regular basis. You have to audit changes that you're making to the different policies and to configurations. And then you also have to identify violations to the policies, especially any violations to segregation of duties. So that's sort of like a picture of what the security team is responsible for. But then the guidelines that are laid by the security team have to be enforced by the operators and the other personas. So when we were thinking about operators, we sort of split it into three buckets, so to speak, to capture all the different varieties of operators in an enterprise and what kinds of tasks they have to perform. So we have an enterprise operator. I have bucketed security administrators also under that, because they perform similar actions. So it could be an operator responsible for a certain security setup or configuration. We have the quota operator and the network operator. So as an enterprise operator dealing with cloud resources, you're basically responsible for resource administration, and you're also responsible for compartmentalizing resources. What that means is you have to deal with like essentially tenancy and making sure that you are providing access or delegating access only under a given namespace or under a given tenant. So you're doing that delegated access so that like you can delegate out the roles and responsibilities in a secure manner, and you by yourself, you're not acting like a super user doing everything, but you're enabling other operators within the team to perform a subset of those actions over a subset of the resources. You are also dealing with tracking changes that are happening to resources. You have to assess policy change implications as well. Anytime you make a change in access, those are big sweeping changes that affect like what teams have access to and what they can do within a given cloud or within a given context. So you have to make sure that you're making the right policy changes. So assessment of policy changes is really important. As with any organization, you always have to like there are going to be some exceptions, so you have to track those carefully. And then finally, you're also responsible for monitoring the apps and the resources that you're responsible for. So another classification of the operator is the quota operator, who is responsible for managing resource quotas. So this is to make sure that like each team or like a line of business within a given enterprise is being allocated cloud resources based on their needs and based on the organization's policy. I mean, we don't want like AWS bills going into like millions of dollars, which typically does happen. So usage tracking is really important. You want to track usage of resources like at an org level, at a team level. You want to have alerts, put alerts for overage. Again, you want to track changes that you're doing to quota management, and then you want to delegate out these quota management activities as well, and then finally assess changes to quota. Then comes the network operator. Network operator in an enterprise is typically responsible for administering again firewall rules or firewall policies, administering network segmentation, delegating out like setup related activities to other network operators downstream, and assessing changes. So, sort of moving on, there are other key personas that we have to care about in an enterprise when it comes to security. It is the developers, because developers at the end of the day are actually going to deal with implementing security within the application. So when I say developers, I'm actually roping in a lot of the operational pieces as well. And it's not necessary that it's the developer doing the tasks that are defined here, but based on the cloud that you are on and the kind of products that you are using, it might be some responsibility might be of the platform, and some responsibility might lie with the developer themselves. So as a developer delivering application security, you are tasked with sort of end user access. So you are you have to define how end users and systems will authenticate and authorize, and you are again doing this in a hybrid environment. So If it was all a homogeneous environment, it's still like easy to define a security policy and to actually achieve it. But it becomes complex when you are dealing with a hybrid environment and you have legacy systems or legacy apps which are potentially sitting outside of a given cloud context, and they have to access resources or apps or APIs within a cloud platform. How is that done in a secure manner? You have to deal with services, databases, any other value-added services in the cloud that like your app needs to interact with. How is that set up and how is that made possible? And you also have to deal with other SaaS services that you would be accessing. So authorization is that like it's a continuum. Like there is like coarse-grained authorization, then there is fine-grained authorization, which goes all the way into like a given context and a given resource context and a given environment context. So it can get fairly complex. So they also have to deal with fine-grained authorization related rules and policies. Logging again is a critical part of how an application is designed. So you have to make sure that you're auditing and logging all the needed sort of like changes to critical resources. Finally come the end users who actually are realizing the value from a business application, or it could be like a consumer application. So at the end of the day, it's all about the kind of data that you're accessing. And as an end user, you care about data privacy and making sure that like your data is not compromised. In an enterprise setup, from an end user policy perspective, you want to make sure that authorized users have access to the data. But the end users themselves may be requesting access to more applications or data, or they could be further delegating access. So those are things that we should be caring about, that they are done in a secure manner, and they also have to understand the implications of any sort of access changes that happen, and they might be instigating those. So as an end user, I want to request access to applications, or I want to revoke access for certain applications over my data. It should be possible. So these are the personas that we have come up with. I don't believe by any means that this is like a done task. We want to work more closely with the working group and have like more participation from the community, and understand sort of like what's happening within enterprises and within your communities, and what kinds of use cases you are seeing. So would be very open to sort of improve this further. That's it from my side, JJ. Yep.
Thank you. From moving on from who we should care about to how we should care about, Ray. So this is, I think you can start off.
I think we're a couple more. Cool. All right. Well, hi, everyone. So I'm Ray Colline. I actually have worked on the Cloud Resource Manager product on Google Cloud Platform, and I'm thinking a lot about policy in Kubernetes these days. But when I came to SAFE and started, I wasn't part of the original crew, but I came on a few months ago. And this space interested me a lot because in my previous positions, we really cared about who was using these tools, and the rights and the kind of guarantees we wanted to make to the users. And I think, and users in this case tend to be the admins. These are the people responsible for certifying systems, for keeping them safe, to be able to say yes to their, to their CIOs and to their constituents that this system is safe, that this system actually does what we intended to do, and I can prove it. And when I make a change, I can understand what I'm doing, and I can still certify it. So we thought a lot about this, and we created a document called the Administrator's Bill of Rights. Coworker of mine, Cyrus Harsef, he drafted the initial copy, and we've been working on it for a little while now. And so what I want to do here is talk about it in terms of the entries it has and what the rights that we define and what they mean. And really, this is kind of a foundational document, and I think it's great to bring it into the Safe Working Group because it can help us really figure out whether we're on the right track or not. And if we can guarantee these things in this Bill of Rights, then we're going to provide a pretty good product at the end. We're going to provide something that actually achieves the objectives of the organization, of the end users, of all the personas that Shri just described. So in a way, when we think about administrators, it's like, well, who are they, right? Well, they're anyone responsible for any subsegment of the system. Anyone who can grant access to someone is an administrator, right? And in organizations, they tend to be, in many ways, they tend to be hierarchical, but they just tend to have, many different levels of administrations. From the very top, the security admin who's doing the whole system, down to a developer who gives access to their neighbor to access this app. So it's a set of principles and requirements for policy and resource management systems. It's defined in a public document, which is linked here. And it focuses on owners of infrastructures primarily and not developers, but actually I think it focuses on all personas. Anyone who grants access to something is covered by the Bill of Rights. And I think using it, we can quickly evaluate existing access management systems. So with that said, let's actually get into what these rights are. So we'll start with the first right, which is essentially administer their organization's cloud resources. So if we dig into that, what does that mean? It means that I can see everything. Like, I'm at the top, I have root access to my organization, I can find and discover everything that I have access to, and that there isn't shadow IT, and that some owner of a system below me can't take me out and say, sorry, you can't see this. And this is important because if I can't see something, I can't actually know about it and I can't certify it. The second thing is audit all accesses and understand the policy grants. So what does Ray have access to? What does JJ have access to in this system, right? That's a first-class thing we need to do. We call it explainability is another way to think about this. And it's the idea that I can understand and ask a question of the system and it will give me an answer such that I can feel confident about that. And so this is actually a challenge in many systems. It's the more knobs and controls that you let administrators define access to, the harder it is to explain what happens when you turn that knob. So being able to give the people the ability to audit both who has access to what and who made an access change is a key right. The third one might seem a little odd, which is I can delete my organization's cloud resources. And this gets back to access. As an administrator, if something is going haywire, I need to be able to push the big red button that says stop. And so if I don't have access to delete, or when I go to delete it, it says, sorry, you have to delete 33 other things in order to delete this, that's a problem. So in these systems, we should be able to have a way for someone who has access to actually follow through with being able to turn something off. The fourth, which Shri mentioned a bit, is compartmentalize organizations' resources. And this is how you can scale. So if you have root on something and you have 5,000 people you have to be responsible for, you don't want to be the single bottleneck. You want to be able to identify other admins in the system and say, you have domain over this set of resources, this compartment of resources. And importantly, and we'll get to this as another subright, which is I can do everything that you can on my subset of resources, right? And I can control when I want you to have to escalate. Right? But I should not be forced into escalating for certain things. I should be able to delegate everything. And this gets to the next one, which is delegation. Right? Clearly, we want to be able to act over the compartment that we created. And then I want to be able to act autonomously. So this means I have full control. So all three of these rights kind of relate to each other. And what we find out in systems is that delegation is possible, but it's not really full delegation. It's missing a set of features. And so therefore, it makes it hard to actually autonomously act on that compartment. Okay, so an important thing here is when I make a compartment and I say, okay, here's this thing. Okay, Ray, you can go administer this thing. I need to be able to constrain the behavior because certain things might be dangerous. And one of the goals as administrators, I want safe by default. So I want to be able to say, hey, you have access to this thing. You can create a namespace. But when you create this namespace, you can't do the following things. And that allows me to certify a system to say, yes, it's self-serve, so it's efficient and people can go ahead and start working. But I also can say that I know they're not going to do very bad things. And so constraining is key. Well, anytime you constrain someone, someone's going to raise their hand and say, well, wait, but I have a special use case. How do I do that? And so making exceptions is at the core. And actually, a lot of systems, because they can't make exceptions, we end up with overgrants. And we end up with things that are either people say, look, it's just too much administration for me to be a bottleneck for everything, or fine, you can just do it. And they open up their systems wider than they want to, simply to deal with the burden of not having to deal with exceptions. So exceptions is a key part of delegation. And then the other thing is that I want to be able to evolve this over time. We might reorg. We might decide that today we're vertically integrated, and now we want to be horizontally integrated. And so we want to separate a database out of an application and move that over to a different team. So can I evolve? Can I actually take resources and take things and create a new compartment from where there wasn't one in the past, and then give it all the benefits of that? Lots of systems don't allow this, right? Even GCP itself has limitations in this area where you can't move stuff out of projects per se. And then lastly, I want to be able to exercise all of these rights, and I want to be able to do it in a hybrid and multi-cloud way, right? So the things we want to come up with here need to be open and need to be able to be implemented across many clouds and don't involve proprietary definitions. So that's a really quick overview of what the Bill of Rights are. We hope that within SAFE, this helps us inform decisions and we can test recommendations against these proposals, which is why we're starting here. And it helps us really think about personas and what they need. And hopefully through that, we can get to the next phase as Dan has indicated here. So thank you. And so I think now we're going to do questions and clarifications and anything we can do. So awesome.
We also have
we
another deep dive session later.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to pick up the...
We also have another deep dive session on Friday that Ray will be driving. So if you guys have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, we appreciate if you want to take a look at it, join, contribute, help us build this together. That'll be good.
And for the deep dive session, anyone's welcome who has opinions on this. And really, we're looking for more information and ways to steer people in the right direction on building these access systems. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.